Welcome, everybody. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We got special guests here today. Dev, Kyle, and Crypto Coffee. They wanted
Big day.
Yeah, it's a big day for us.
Don't be nervous, guys. It's okay. We're just people just like you.
I'm not nervous. You're nervous.
So anyway.
You know, they say don't meet your idols, and here I am, two of my idols.
I look forward to disappointing you.
I disappointed a lot of people in Vegas, that's for sure.
Yeah. I was a witness to that. I sure got an earful from people because of how disappointed they were with the crypto copies.
From people we didn't even know.
So we've got the dev Kyle here. He was let's just hear your story, Dev Kyle. What is your role with Hex at first, right? And are you I don't know if you're working on PulseChain at all, or you're just kind of in the background, or
I'm sure you know some things at least. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. How to answer that question? I guess we'll start at the beginning.
It's loaded.
Yeah. So 2019, I got turned on to the Hex project and just wanted to dive right in, teach myself how to do sort of smart contract programming. Thought, oh, this sounds like a cool idea. It kind of dispenses with a bunch of the frills and kind of BS surrounding crypto projects at the time. This is sort of coming off of the 2017 ICO hype cycle.
Right.
And thought this would be a simple thing to get started with. Turns out Hex was a simple idea that's very complicated in practice. I ended up helping quite a bit with some of the design and game theory thoughts. Built a bunch of tools to sort of test and harden hypotheses about it, and helped kind of through the dev and release process. Stuck around the community because, of course, the promise of Hex is you sort of set it and forget it for years at a time, but in practice, that's not what happened. So lots of people have questions. Right.
I wish.
Oh, we didn't do that. We didn't follow through on that plan.
Right.
So just continued being an active community member, helping folks with knowledge and code, and I have a kind of a long history at this point in software engineering, large systems, companies you've heard of. So I have a lot of practical industry experience to kind of bring to the table. and have continued with other kind of Richard Hart projects, Richard Hart ideas, just lending skills, expertise, knowledge. It's all volunteer based, so it's as I have free time. So when you ask, am I working on PulseChain, you know, I've dipped in and out. I help how I can. But I do have a full-time job, so it has to be balanced against that.
Right. So
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, so you're just doing it for fun. That's what I
Yeah,
always
this is
think
all
that
for
is
fun.
funny. It's like you just do it for fun. Like you've been you coded some of Hex, or at least I know you did the Monte Carlo simulations, right?
Yeah, so
For
I
Hex.
wrote some simulation software, and as we did iterations on the contract and came up with different models in hopes of solving some of the core problems, one of which is to make longer pays better actually true. That is much harder than it sounds.
Right.
So I wrote some simulation software that we could plug in the contract and just see what it would do under kind of random conditions, or you could bend it towards more realistic conditions as you wanted. So there was that. I actually did write some Solidity code that did not make it into the final contract, but there is a funny story there that the main contract dev only knew me by reputation because Richard would say in public, we have this problem. I would write some Solidity code, me being a noob, being like, oh, I know how to do that. And then Richard would tell the main dev, Kyle wrote this, merge it. And that guy would say, who's Kyle? F him. Why does he think he knows how to do this? So we got off on the wrong foot because of that intermediary communication.
Interesting.
But we're buddies now.
So wait, were you and Richard like that too? Did you guys kind of have contending viewpoints at some point?
That's a good question. I don't think he and I ever disagreed on the values. So we've always been very aligned on what's important and just talk in terms of trade-offs. We can achieve these values, but here are the engineering trade-offs that need to be made. There's a time to market versus sort of robustness trade-off sometimes. Or there's a feature creep that we could do that would solve these things and be pretty cool, but will be slow or will be hard or will be complicated. So no, I don't think we ever disagreed on those things. And me and the main dev didn't actually disagree on the content of any of the changes. It was just the messaging of, hey, this guy came in, he wrote some code, merge it.
Right. Who's this guy?
Yeah.
Right.
Who's
You're
this
the new guy. You're the new
Right,
guy.
just some guy from the internet wrote some code.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Let me see. Hexcon, thank you for the 5555. What up,
Dang, dude.
guys? You're doing well. Thank you so much, Hexcon. We are doing very well. We've got the
Very generous.
two main men, the Kyle and
I know.
Coffee here, and Hexplosive. So yeah, so what are your thoughts? My big question for you, and people are gonna, this is very polarizing in the Hex community right now. What are your thoughts on the ETH chains? The extra forks, the ETH and ETH. What's your long-term thoughts, short-term thoughts? What do you think?
That's a good question. I didn't realize there was. I didn't realize there were so many thoughts, actually. So I read briefly about the ETH thing. That seems like a very laudable effort. I can see why you could take a cynical viewpoint and say this is a cash grab. This is just a straight fork. You can clone some of the tooling and call it your own thing and hope to extract some value. But I also see it as a legitimately good idea to have a failsafe, that you have chain state that you can fall back to, because you can never be sure. Right, I mean, the merge has happened. Ethereum is on proof of stake now. If it turns out that experiment fails, wouldn't it be nice to have state to go back to? DeFi could just change which chain is legitimate by which one they will actually cash you out for, if you're USDC or USDT or whatever. This whole space of crypto, to me, is interesting in that it is all highly experimental, and that the facts on the ground can change from day to day as you learn about who's a scammer or who is actually doing like reserve banking but said they weren't. You can sort of learn and go and change and pivot and adapt because it's all in software and there's sort of a social consensus on top of that of what is backed, like what is made legitimate through real fiat, through the, what is it, the full faith of governments.
Yeah.
So I don't have a strong opinion near term or long term on ETH-W or ETH-F. ETH-F, I don't know enough about, but from what I understand was basically Poloniex Poloniex' choice for a backup chain. So it's hard to have an opinion because we don't know enough. We don't know if those are going to survive or if they're just going to be centralized versions of the old thing. Like Ethereum in the 1.0 era was highly decentralized in terms of who was mining it comparatively, like across the space. If ETH-F ends up being just a bunch of Poloniex-owned miners, then it won't be decentralized, and it probably will fail that test of confidence over time. ETH-POW may be a totally legitimate secondary chain because their pitch is basically, hey, you spent all this money on mining hardware, or GPUs, or solar rigs, or whatever you're doing. Just point it at this, and you can mine it forever.
Right.
I like that they're not beating around the bush on that either. Like Chandler, the founder, he basically said verbatim, this is so miners can continue mining. And people are criticizing him for that, but it's actually the honest truth. He could have chose the narrative of proof of work is better, but he knows it's pretty objective. I mean, proof of work for proof of stake, people fight about that all day long, but the real reason is just miners need to make money. And to me, it seems like it'll be around a while. Whether or not it's highly successful price-wise, that's another thing, but it'll be around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, at worst, it's benign, right? It's not creating a run on ASICs or GPUs. They're already purchased. They're already operational.
Yeah. So I had one question, big question for you. If you built Hex today, what would you do differently from whatever we've done?
Oh,
What would be
goodness.
one thing that you'd do a little bit different?
What's one thing we'd do differently? I think I don't think we have strong evidence that the Bitcoin claim was useful.
That's
I think
that's mine too. I think that I
that
would give it to the
that
Ethereum
took,
dudes.
yeah, I mean, so this has come up in a couple of contexts recently. That feature dominated all of the security audit attention and
Right.
dominated a lot of the development and infrastructure slash operational time in being able to quickly dump the address state of the Bitcoin chain, compress that down into balances and addresses, build out the data you needed to make the claims, upload that to the website so that you could generate claim proofs. There's a huge amount of engineering time in figuring out all the different address types and kind of exhaustively figuring out how to cover the most different kinds of Bitcoin addresses. And the data are pretty tepid in terms
Right.
of who actually claimed, and then they just dumped their coins.
Yeah.
So, it didn't get positive press. It didn't have any stickiness for the vast majority of Bitcoin people who participated. And I don't know that it was a net win.
Was that? Yeah, because it took you guys. It was because they had to do all the Merkle tree stuff. Didn't that take like the longest part of all of the development? Was that part was trying to get the Bitcoin
That's
free
not
claim?
quite fair. That's not quite
Yeah.
fair. Richard pivoted on a lot of features mid-development cycle. I think that
Okay.
honestly took the most time. The Bitcoin claim stuff was in from the beginning because that was the whole pitch, is like, I think he's even talked about this publicly. His idea basically was, how do we export Bitcoin state onto the Ethereum chain? Because the Ethereum chain has more features, more interoperability, and more of a runway, more of a future than the Bitcoin chain. But how can we take that balance state and let you move it to Ethereum? We're going to do a Bitcoin derivative, or, state transfer. So that was like the core of the idea. And then all this other stuff. And all this other stuff ended up taking a huge amount of time because there was a lot of back and forth on, are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? We explore features, then we kill them. They prove intractable, etc., etc. It did take the lion's share of the auditing time, because that is a domain in which auditors feel comfortable So they can look at things like signatures, Merkle trees. That's their area of expertise, is sort of the more straightforward or security primitive stuff. So that's where they focus their attention. As such, it then becomes annoying to explain this phase goes away. You don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it only lasted a year, so it was probably like not really, like you said, it was almost not worth it for you guys to. Would it have been easier to do the Ethereum system state?
Would it have been easier to do the Ethereum system state? Meaning for
like
people
for like Bitcoin, like a free claim for like we did for Bitcoin,
as opposed to the Bitcoin one.
Instead of Bitcoin.
Oh, massively easier. Massively easier.
Yeah, so I would have if it was me, I wouldn't have done Bitcoin. I don't know if it would have been easier from just what you said now. It'd be easier, but I was thinking give the Ethereum, because the Ethereum guys, and I think Richard said this too, they're a lot more open-minded to give away or to new things. They're like, oh, okay,
they are,
especially in ERC20. You'd think, you'd imagine.
They may not have been as unfriendly as Bitcoin people, but from a technical point of view, the fact that Bitcoin does UTXO versus account-based balances is actually very complicated. So they have a lot of different address types, and those addresses can be associated with your same private key, but be different address types. So it's actually quite difficult to compress your claim data to then actually generate a valid claim. So there's certain address types that don't work at all within Bitcoin. There's a bunch of complexity. It has a long history of going through many changes and of different systems adopting different types of addresses. It's very complex. Ethereum is very straightforward. All of your balances are associated with one address, one account, one user account, and it's very easy in contract code to verify signatures for a single address. So even if you have multiple addresses, it would be very easy to generate signatures and verify them.
Okay. Crypto Coffee, you got anything?
Well, a lot of that was probably over people's heads, including myself. So I'm just thinking, like, this is so much more than I could have ever imagined. I think back to what I knew about crypto in general when I first got into Hex, and it's just and I still do. It's kind of like, it's kind of like in martial arts when you come to the realization that you just have zero idea what's going on,
Yeah,
So that's kind of what I'm getting right now. I'm watching you do some crazy moves right now,
So,
what I think,
Kyle, you are a jiu-jitsu black belt, right?
No, not a black belt. No.
but you're a jiu-jitsu fan?
Yeah.
Nice, dude.
Okay.
So you know what I'm
4
talking about
years.
then. When you watch different different styles of jujitsu or different levels, or you roll with somebody who's so
Yeah.
much better, a black belt, you're like, oh Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm a little child again.
So the parallel's pretty good because if you come in as a novice, people are doing stuff. Like you can see action happening, but you can't interpret it. You're literally not able to really see what's happening.
Yes.
But and it's actually kind of me watching soccer is like this. Like, what was that? Did they win? Like, I don't understand what's happening.
Right.
Particularly with like clock stoppages.
Yeah,
So
they just
you
start
don't.
running sometimes, or it's
Yeah,
just
like
why
why
does it stop now?
Right.
It's going now. Okay, it's over
Yeah.
the time you guys said it was gonna go. It's
A
90
little
minutes.
arbitrary.
We're at 93.
Exactly. And with jujitsu, as you learn, because it is very knowledge based and sort of recognizing patterns and giving yourself sort of a routine to follow to get to the position you want to get in. As you learn more, you can interpret more of what you're seeing. But as you get to the deeper levels or higher levels, people are able to play games with your perceptions. And they're able to make you think you are seeing something. You go for it, but it was a trap.
Or they know the step that you're going for, the sequence of movements that you're going for, and they
dangle
bait
that
you
arm
into
out
it.
there. Yeah, I bet you could take this arm if you wanted, and then
Black belts will get you to like tap yourself out. You know what I mean? You get yourself into a shit position and it's like, how'd you guys, what? But that's kind of how I feel listening to you talk about development and all the work and attention that goes into every little thing, different aspects of these. Hex specifically is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's a very detail-oriented process. There is a lot that happens in the crypto space that is a little bit fast and loose because software generally is best done when you treat it iteratively. That we're going to do just enough to learn something, and then we will fix what's broken and move forward. Having tight feedback loops in that way tends to grow the best software or evolve the best software, because you can think about something until you're blue in the face, but there will be angles you didn't consider, or just facts that you didn't know that will be revealed to you when you try to run the system live.
You even hear Richard talk about that, right? Like he's talked about like, oh, and this was a crazy feature that I just realized and didn't really have any thought about or intention of, it wasn't an intention. A feature that he created. Yeah, like the emergent properties, right? Like the community itself is an emergent property, but also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like Kyle, in your simulations, I think they kind of expected an average weighted stake length of around 2 to 2.5 years, and it blew everyone's minds that in reality it's closer to 7 years now. So people are really going like way farther than we expected them to.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a bunch of things that didn't bear out. It was very useful to do those exercises. So share rate came out of that. Big payday came out of that, actually. So there were a couple of concrete pieces of feedback that I gave on a couple of occasions that bore out in simulation and actually changed Richard's mind. And one of them was Big
You did
Payday.
the share rate, right?
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
And Big Payday. You were the.
Okay.
We obviously say thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The share rate was one of the most innovative things, I mean, in the history of cryptocurrency, in my opinion. Like, once people understand it, and people that don't think it's a big deal really don't understand it yet.
Yeah, that was I don't take sole credit for that. We were talking about that particular feature for a long time. I synthesized several ideas and came up with that as a pitch. Like, I think we can do this, and I think here's how we should do it. There was a community member that had an idea like it early on, but couldn't solve for bonusing and couldn't solve for a few of the other things, but the basic idea of things getting more expensive over time rather than inflating existing stakes was sort of the core idea, and then there were a couple of specific other things that I came up with that I will take credit for. But the big payday, that was 100% me, because
Nice.
the way it worked before that was that a small percentage of the unclaimed Bitcoin would be awarded each day of the launch year.
Right.
And I just showed in simulation after simulation, this will never have the property that Richard wanted, which was you don't benefit massively for learning about it one day earlier.
Right.
And there was no way around that. It just distributing so many coins every day just made that impossible. So compressing it all to one day at the end, where you take one snapshot of everything unclaimed, and then everybody who's staked gets a cut. That was the way to do that.
And did you guys think that there was going to be way more people free claiming the Bitcoin? I'm guessing you did, because you were saying
We did. So yeah, we ran the whole range from, 0.1% to 90% of people who could claim. Yeah, it was pretty disappointing.
3%, right?
Pierce E said general vibe on Hedron and Icosa. What is thank you for the 75.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
wow.
Pierce.
Is that directed at me?
That's directed at you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Everything that I've seen from the developer behind those has been very honest and forthright and good intentioned. Hadron itself, I don't think I understand why people like it as much as they do. I get it as an idea, and we talked about encapsulated stakes years ago, and I like that he has kind of a protocol first approach by making it ERC 721 compatible. The added feature of basically auctioning off distressed debt is good. That mirrors another real world thing. So this is, I don't know what Icosa does, honestly. I don't keep up that much. But as a general vibe, I get good vibes from Alex. I think is the dev behind those things.
Yeah.
We got another question from Lights Out, and he says, "What do you think about the Go laying? Why we went from Go is let me see. Why pivoted from Golang? Rewrite for Pulse. There we go. On the Golang rewrite for Pulse. Oh, here we go.
The consensus code essentially being taken out of Solidity and yeah.
What a good question. So here's the problem with having your consensus on chain. You become subject to the constraints of your virtual machine. So imagine for a moment, I'll use an actual example. So in the game Minecraft, they introduced something called redstone, which you can use to like
build
push information. Yeah. So 10 years ago, I think it was like 10 years ago, I saw a demonstration where somebody built a CPU in Minecraft, right? And that CPU obviously worked at like one operation per 10 seconds or something, like something just horribly slow. Because when they zoomed out, it took up thousands of square feet to build this like one thing. And that's a lot like what the Ethereum virtual machine is doing, because its primary job is to output state changes, like proofs that I started at A and I did some stuff, and if you do that stuff, you'll get B, just like I got.
Right.
That's its primary output. The primary artifact that it spits out is that if I make these state changes, I end up at B. And that's verifiable. Everyone else can do that too. And because that computer has to run within your computer, it has to be less powerful by definition. Because it's less powerful and also subject to the rules of I have to be able to replicate exactly what you did. Excuse me. It constrains what you can do. So it's open, like you can look at the code, you can run a decompiler and like see what it's actually doing. And that's nice. That has some nice properties. The fact that Hex is readable on the public blockchain, like the source code is there, means that we can always address questions that people have, like, hey, what's this about? Hey, what's that about? I don't think this works right. It definitely does, and you can see. So if you if you want that transparency, the cost is you have to run it in this virtual computer. And that comes with certain kinds of constraints. Moreover, the nodes that are running the software to come to consensus have to transmit the information between them, and then it becomes subject to all of the consensus vulnerabilities. Like if you need to have two computers agree on the output and convince a third computer, you have fewer tools available to you if that has to take place in the context of the virtual computer. So moving it to Golang gives you more performance because you get to use your actual computer rather than the virtual computer. You're not constrained by only doing things that the virtual computer can do. Because like the virtual computer has to account for every step and like produce, here are the steps I took. It has to basically ship its algorithm to other computers. Using my real computer, I can use shortcuts, regular engineering shortcuts. And anybody else is free to write software that does the same thing, use their own shortcuts, use their own like optimized stuff in different programming languages. So with that explanation, I think that's the right call. I think the starting point of doing that in the virtual machine, like in contracts, was a good, it was like a good faith effort. Hey, let's put this on the blockchain so it's all there. Like everybody can just interact with the blockchain and do their stuff, and they can have confidence that it's all true because it's happening on chain. But I think as a practical concern, you can't run a blockchain from within a blockchain.
It makes sense. I mean, so it's a lot quicker and it's easier to develop and everything on, right? Is that what you're pretty much?
And you just have more tools available to you to fix things or to do large operations. One thing the blockchain is not good at doing is large operations. So imagine you need a contract, like say the staking contract, to do 10,000 things. Maybe it can't do that in 3 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever.
So this is more throughput effectively. Is that true?
It's throughput, and again, you have access to more. traditional engineering tools and constructs, whereas within the blockchain, within Solidity and the assembly language that it compiles down into, you're just constrained. It can only do the kinds of primitive operations that it can spit out evidence for. Whereas in a traditional programming language, you don't have that constraint.
That's crazy.
Was it taking
So
up
it's
like?
actually crazy. Oh, go ahead, Crop.
Was it taking up like almost the whole block? Like I'm not even sure what ratio of the block that the consensus code was taking up.
Well, so here's the other thing that's hard to foresee. So this is something that in Hex, I mean, you were asking about the process of developing it. You have to develop it assuming that people are going to interact with it in certain ways, or certain numbers of people are going to interact with it in a given time, because there's all this timing stuff that can happen if you try to cram everything like in the last block of the day. Like you try to start your stake right at or right before the day rolls over because there's some thing you're trying to game. With the consensus code, people can play games with it. They could try to do a bunch of things at critical timing windows to cause unexpected behavior or to cause something weird to happen. We saw this in practice, and in fact, we were a little bit inoculated to this effect with Hex because we saw what happened with EOS. EOS went through this with their launch phase where people were playing games by entering the day's pool right at the last minute and just paying high gas fees to just like ram in their Ethereum right at the last minute. Or you would watch a graph throughout the day and you could see, oh, somebody just missed the cutoff because we started with
the
like
next day.
Spike.
Yeah. We got that in Hex though too.
We did. So if anything, that should have been enough evidence that trying to do consensus layer stuff or paying stakers stuff in a contract was going to be subject to those sorts of timing problems.
Right.
Interesting.
All
I've
right.
got another question if we want to pivot. So I'm not sure how much you know about this related to pulse chain development, but I think a lot of people are also wondering, there's been bugs found in both Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain that were then discovered by PulseChain developers and fixed within PulseChain. Are you allowed to publicly talk about those, or do you know what they are?
I will err on the side of not talking about them in particular.
Okay.
Are
they critical? Would you
I'll
say?
say this. There are limits to what you can copy from other successful projects when you don't operate in the same context that those projects operate. So, not to be too vague, Binance Smart Chain operates in a context of it has an external controller. BNB chain messages BSC and tells it who the new validators are. So that doesn't sound like that big a deal. It's like, oh, so I just need something to tell me what the new validators are, and then I could write that, and then I'll just tell myself.
Right.
No problem. But that's actually harder than it sounds. And you then start to realize, oh, there are some safety net things you can do when you have an external authority that you can't do from within your system. Similarly to the operating in the context of a virtual computer, it is constrained by its rules. So if you put all the rules in the virtual computer, then you have a hard problem of trying to fix yourself if somebody finds something that you couldn't do anything about. BSC doesn't have that problem because they have a failsafe in BNB. Ethereum similarly has a large community, and most people are kind of watching each other, and they're able to adapt relatively quickly if they find somebody being exploitive, with a notable exception of there was the one pool that was doing the uncle attacks where they were like intentionally screwing with a clock to orphan off other blocks. They were doing that for like 2 years. and I think it was only recently published in a paper how you could do it. And hey, we analyzed who's been producing blocks, and for 2 years, this one mining pool has been doing that systematically.
Wow.
There are things like that you can't really go back and fix. But if you have lots and lots of eyes on the problem, maybe you can fix forward.
Mm.
So that's what I'll say about that, is that the ecosystems are different, the context is different, so there are limits to what you can practically just lift from those and reuse.
So it sounds like the fixes were related to keeping validators honest in terms of the rotation and maybe slashing as well.
In
this
neck of the
context.
woods. Yeah, in that neck of the woods.
Okay.
Hey, Pierce, thank you for the 37. I wish I could think as fast as this guy. Can we get this knowledge maybe once a week? Hexo coffee? Well, yeah, maybe.
That's very reasonable.
Right.
We like, yeah,
Such a spoiled Mexican.
I'm sure the dev Kyle, you know, he just does coding on for fun for the PulseChain.
Yeah.
He's got ample amounts of time.
Yeah, he's just chilling.
Yeah.
Not like he's
Thank
weird.
you.
I'm barely employable. No one wants me to work for them.
I was gonna ask, is this has to be good for a resume, or would it depend on?
I don't put this on my resume. No, these worlds are separate for me.
Okay.
Hexo and I talk about that, how there's the crypto world and then a real world that you're in. And there's like a balance that you gotta mess with, you know.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, there's nothing malicious about it. It's just, frankly, I don't want to be asked in a professional context about it, because my initial experience with crypto was very disappointing. So in like 2016, 2017, I was looking into basically voting integrity. Like, why don't we have electronic voting more ubiquitously? And there's a bunch of research papers on protocols for coercion-resistant voting. It's technically feasible, but there's all these, like, how do you deal with strong-arm governments, and how do you deal with people just literally selling their private keys? How do you deal with this, that, and the other? Blockchain kind of comes up as a concept, as in an append-only database that you just can publicly post info. That got me kind of into this world. I got super into it, taught myself kind of all the cryptography I needed, and was sort of working on it talked to some professional colleagues about it, and I had this horrible, disappointing experience where I got together like 20 people who said they were interested in blockchain. And I said, okay, so here's what I know. And I put together a PowerPoint presentation and like went through stuff. And that took 20 minutes. And then the other 40 minutes were people talking about their day trading on what was it? Bitfinex? Yeah, it was Bitfinex at the time. Oh, have you tried this? Have you tried that? I'm using these charts. It was just trading. Nobody had any technical interest at all. I tried one more time, and the group had pared down from like 20 people to like 5. And then it was the same thing. They just talked about trading. And then it was just me the next time. So I thought,
Well, I've actually
okay,
got,
this is it.
Out by yourself.
This is it. I guess these worlds are separate, and so they will stay that way.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a similar
sense.
story in the rat race world. Basically, that it wasn't so much that people were just too degen to care about the blockchain itself in terms of being traders, but it was more so all getting together and trying to figure out what blockchain is and how to use it. And I was actually a project manager on a team that built an internal app for the company I worked for that it was basically like an internal company cryptocurrency that you could send to other people as a reward for doing positive behavior in the company. But what I realized is that even the developers that were in charge of this, like, nobody really was sticking to crypto principles. They just wanted to flex that they knew blockchain so that other clients, when they came to us, we could say, oh, yeah, we know all about blockchain. But I mean, every pitch, every idea, nobody could really get over the fact this is really a write-only database. You can't edit this. It's immutable and it's supposed to be. So all the applications that we were talking about building really didn't need blockchain at all. We just wanted to use the buzzword. So I was disappointed by the fact that nobody seemed to understand like the crypto fundamental principles. And we go ahead and we make this app and it's very successful. Everybody loves it. But then everyone is asking, like the main dev or me, hey, can you revert my transaction? I didn't mean to send it to that guy. It's like, we're not, that's not the point here. Like, that's, you're totally missing the plot. So I think that cryptocurrency being a separate world is just innovating so much faster than the mainstream can really catch on to. So that's why I like to keep it separate as well. Like,
It's a good idea.
it's
We got We got a question for you. Do you know about EIP 444, and do you think it'll cause issue with EHEX in the future if implemented?
Somebody asked me about this earlier today. No. So this is a client optimization to not store or vend data older than a year. So it's about block hashes and logs. Those are things that clients care about if you want to like look at the guts of what happened in a block 2 years ago. That data is available on the blockchain, but your client software that has a copy of the database doesn't necessarily need to keep that data around to tell you.
Okay.
So let's say you have a website. I realized I need to go higher. Let's say you have a website, and that website says, hey, enter an address here, and I'll tell you everything it's done for the last 5 years. So I go, okay, 0x, blah, 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 blah. And it spits it all out. What it's doing is it has some software that has a copy of the blockchain, and it's searching through all the transactions associated with an address, and then it's going to send that back to your website and you display it. What EIP 4444444 does is basically tells client software that sort of crawls the database, the crawler. It tells the crawler, you could just stop after a year. Don't bother. Don't look. And that's fine. So now your website doesn't work anymore because your website will stop looking after a year.
Right.
Hex, as a contract on the blockchain, by definition, has to have the full state of the blockchain available. Because if I send a transaction to a some transaction node, whether I'm running one or I use Infura or whatever alternative, and I say, hey, I want to execute this contract, I want to end a stake. To do that, to actually execute the contract, requires that it do these lookups in the database. Not for logs, not for transaction history, but for the actual data that on this day or in this memory slot, which took place on this day, what are the data associated with that? Now add that in, go to the next memory slot, add that in, go to the next memory slot. So it's directly tied to the data that's stored on archive nodes. So if you have an archive of the blockchain, then but then the contract has to work.
Okay.
From what I read on that EIP, they it's basically just a client optimization, so you don't have to carry around sort of ancient data for the more superficial use cases, like what happened 2 years ago with this address. That shouldn't affect the actual operation of Hex.
Okay.
For practical purposes, it does mean that go.hex.com can't use off-the-shelf client software if that change gets adopted by the main clients. Because for it to tell you about your stakes in the past, it does need logs, it does need transaction histories and events and things like that.
Interesting.
So, yeah. Let's see. Zen Crypto Jack Levin discuss. I'm a fan. I don't know, man. Not even looked into it.
I don't know.
I don't even know what
Jack
any of
Levin
that
was on
means.
our show. He seemed like a good dude.
I know what that word means, but I don't know what anything else means.
Let's
I'll call it an interesting experiment with no sacrifice. So thank God, and it's free to claim for anyone. So
there you go.
an interesting experiment that might also be a decent adoption tool when it exists on PulseChain, because you could tell people, hey, you could claim these free tokens. I don't know if Tragedy of the Commons will happen with the price. That's what I'm skeptical about, but that's all I've got so far. I like it, good intentions, low risk. I mean, he's a very nice guy to talk to. Yes, smart dude. I will say that.
Thank you, Piers. So what about this is a question I had when the Ethereum proof of stake happened. Why don't we just copy the proof of stake chain to make PulseChain? Why wouldn't we just take that and just, I mean, aren't we just a fork of proof of stake? Isn't that what PulseChain will be?
It's a good question. There's some things that are different about Ethereum proof of stake from BSC. So the pitch for cloning BSC: 1, billions of dollars and hundreds of projects have launched on it successfully. No large scale hacks or exploits. bridges notwithstanding. But the core chain seems to work just fine. The validator set is small and finite. It's 30, 33 or something. Or maybe that's what we ended up with.
I think there's
21.
more now. I don't know. I
I
heard
think
there were more.
I think they did bump it up to more, but it was small. Small compared to thousands or hundreds of thousands that the ETH2 is targeting. So BSC also had faster block times, kind of as one of its selling points. The reason it can do that is because it has a small number of validators, and the expectation can be that those validators are running beefy machines. ETH2 doesn't optimize for those things. The tenets of ETH2 are, let's maintain the property that anybody with a computer can participate and can be a validator. So it should not require heavy lifting on a computer where you need like a server grade computer. You should be able to do this on a personal computer. We need an algorithm that can select randomly or unpredictably from a huge number of validators, because we had a huge number of miners. So now we need to support a huge number of validators. We want to keep the mining rewards and
No.
Oh my goodness.
Rug.
There he is. There he is. I don't know what happened.
Oh.
There you go. Oh, I put the wrong
where
one.
did you lose?
You're back.
Mining reward.
No, right there. Yeah,
I'm ready.
So they wanted to keep mining rewards kind of married to the London hard fork EIP 1559. So the sort of flexible block size, whereas BSC just increased the block size. Again, because they can make this assertion that you're running large server grade hardware. So BSC was the starting point because it had a lot of the key performance features that are interesting, faster, smaller set of validators, so there's sort of fewer people you need to keep your eyes on. Bigger blocks, so you can have kind of more traffic, and one of the common complaints that I think we've all had with Ethereum 1.0 is that building businesses or building applications that demand storage or demand being able to handle spike throughput, as lots of people try to do things, is just untenable. It's too expensive, or your transactions get rejected. And the ecosystem was just kind of unfriendly. BSC set out to be friendly to those things. So that's why it seemed like a much better starting point than Ethereum at the time. And that, in some sense, remains true, that Ethereum 2 is trying to maximize on certain parts of the things you can do that we don't necessarily care about. That said, there is a case for doing that, because while it hasn't had the track record of success that BSC has, with businesses launching on it without any problems, it has had a lot of eyes on it, and it has had a lot of baking time on the test net, and now it's live. And so if you start from there and work on it, then whatever changes you need to make, all of that time is spent hardening the main thing as well. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea or a bad thought now that we're in that world. Like a year ago, that wasn't the case, but now we are. It seems worth thinking about, but people should also remember there was a reason that BSC was the starting point. That BSC set out to address some of the complaints that people had about Ethereum. It just didn't carry Ethereum state.
Let's see, we got what the heck? Dev Kyle is too smart for we mere mortals. Great stream. Thank you. What the heck?
Thank you.
Yes, he is. He's very intelligent. We love having him. Do you get Crypto Coffee? You got any questions?
Not right now. I mean, so basically what you're saying is that because we're a fork of Binance Smart Chain more so than ETH1, one of the main differentiators is less validators, and whereas ETH2 still wants everybody to be able to plug and play, we're sacrificing basically centralization for performance.
Yeah, that's correct.
To some degree, on a. I mean, I'm not saying anything is centralized or decentralized. People need to think about that on a spectrum, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's still a blockchain. The centralization. Let me give an example of a different chain entirely that did have a problem with this. EOS. So EOS in some ways was the progenitor to a lot of these things. So they were the first general purpose chain that was well known and well funded, that wanted to do delegated proof of stake. And it turned into a disaster because they had a bunch of levels of indirection. There was huge amounts of collusion between the block producers. The way that they did delegation was goofy. They had to keep writing custom tools to do things, and they didn't let you just have general purpose execution on your machines. You actually had to lease CPU, memory, and storage individually. So it was sort of overly complicated for what it tried to do, and it didn't have any good hygiene mechanisms to get yourself out of a bad situation. A concrete example, you couldn't sell your last EOS token because you needed it to pay for the compute to sell it. So you're just like stuck with just some amount that you can never
So
get
you
rid of.
need like 2 total to get rid of all of it.
No, you can't.
You ever get rid
Because
of it.
you need
never
one to
Out of
pay
one,
for the
yeah.
compute to sell one.
Didn't they also have like a steal all your money function and all the 21 validators were
Right.
run by one dude or something?
Yeah. So that's what I mean by collusion and cartel.
Yeah.
So, and it ended up just collapsing. Oh, and they could vote on what the inflation should be for their term.
Yeah.
So
They
it's like,
meaning
I
the
vote for $1 million.
5 guys that own the
Right.
validators. 21.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. So they had a bunch of just operational problems and just ideas that may have sounded good. I don't want to get too derisive because the person who came up with these ideas is well known in the space of having had a lot of successful projects, but these are sort of like ivory tower architecture kinds of ideas where, oh, and what if, like, Amazon, you pay only for what you use, compute or memory or storage, and you could trade off. But nobody does. Everyone just wants a computer to compute the things and store the things and load the things into memory.
One of the founders was also notorious for leaving his projects half-baked, so to speak.
Yeah.
Same guy, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same guy. Yeah, so that to me is the example to keep in the forefront of our mind why you don't want things to be too complicated. The start from a working thing is a good approach. But what I said before is also true, that there are limits when you change the context.
Right. So why do you think that PulseChain is gonna taking so long? like with Hex, because it's like, because Hex took
That's a
how long?
great
2 years?
question, Hex. Yeah.
And so Hex, and PulseChain is like, we've seen it and we've seen other things already come out and they're working. So
And
why
crash and burn.
PulseChain
Mm-hmm.
and crash
To be
burn.
fair.
Yeah.
I mean, this is... So the perennial conspiracy theory that Hex is like right on the verge of rug pulling everyone has been pretty funny for the last several years, because actual rug pulls come and go, twice a month. So I think people don't really understand that scams can be fast. Like there's no rule that they just will just keep pulling, keep pulling. So why is PulseChain taking so long? That context change adds a lot of, well, no, I'm going to answer this differently. Hex had to be as robust as it was because there was no central authority. There is no emergency lever to pull. It's like figuring out how to launch a rocket that's going to get to Neptune. You need to predict all the orbits, all the gravitational wobbles, all the positions of everything, because once that rocket leaves the launch pad, you can't adjust it. There's like micro adjustments maybe through thrusters, but then you run out of fuel and then you can't adjust anymore. And it's just going, and it's just gonna go into space. Hex was that way, and I think Richard knew that, and that was one of the core tenets, that there is no lever. There's no emergency stop. That ethic also has to be brought to PulseChain. A huge number of people sacrificed an enormous amount of crypto with the expectation, not of the profit or work of others, but the expectation that the same ethic of rigor and security and trustlessness and, I'm going to say safety, but hopefully you know what I mean, that it's not gonna just get knocked over or exploited immediately.
Lack of negative externalities.
Yeah, it's going to be a robust L1 on par with any of the other L1s, and hopefully better, because we've seen some of the failure modes for things like Solana, for example. when you do things in a particular way. Now, writing a blockchain is much harder than writing a product for a blockchain. So Hex has some guarantees because it runs on a blockchain. Your transaction will either fully work or fully not. It is a atomic transaction. So if I try to end a stake and I run out of gas, then it just says, nope, you didn't. It doesn't partially end it. It doesn't put it in a weird state where I can't recover. A blockchain, like the consensus layer, can get into weird states. It has to communicate with other computers. It has to come into agreement. It has to resolve when two computers don't agree. You have to figure out what to do if one of the validators is offline and they keep missing their turn. Like, what do? It has to resolve what happens when two computers think it's their turn at the same time for whatever reason. If you get one person controlling 5 of the validators, like, how do you deal with that? Is that really a problem? What could they do if they got 5 turns in a row? You have to think about a much larger set of vulnerabilities or problems. Now, that's just if you were to invent it from scratch. Now, you're taking something that is already known to work. But when you press on it a little bit and you say, okay, but we're changing the context. We don't have BNB. We don't have a secondary chain that messages what the rotation ought to be. There are these little, like, imagine you have a scarf and there's like little bits of yarn or little bits of thread kind of dangling off of it, because hand knit stuff has that. And it's little errors, it's little places where you had to tie off and start again. And you notice those, you go, that's weird, but that's fine. I mean, we're just following the scarf pattern, so we just do the scarf. And if you look at it closely enough and you start to pull on those and say, well, I kind of want to button this up and make it look sharp, so I'm going to just like pluck that out. But you start pulling it and it just starts unraveling like a section up here. And you go, that's weird. Do I keep pulling on this? Do I just cut it off? Like, what's the
I pull it
plan
as fast as
here?
I can.
Right, like, I don't know how to invent a scarf pattern. Like, I'm pulling as fast. Exactly.
I'm not nude under here.
Yeah, exactly. So it's easy for me to describe that it's hard because of a context change that doesn't seem like a big deal until you see why it's a big deal. But the process of seeing why it's a big deal is hard work. And it only comes through testing. It only comes through creative ideas of how to push and pull and flex the system to
And
make
actually test
sure,
it.
yeah, to make sure it does what people are expecting it to do and what we expect of ourselves.
Right.
And I'm saying that in terms of the community and what I know about Richard, what he expects of himself and the things that he releases.
That's
Let's
encouraging.
see. Lights out. Thank you for the $100.
Thanks, dude.
The community needed this convo. Thanks, Kyle.
I love that they pay you for this. I'm completely teasing.
Wait a second. Don't look behind that curtain.
Yeah.
All right, so I got a really big question. What are you most excited for with PulseChain? What is the most like exciting feature that you see that is like being built on top of it or in it? I mean, or PulSex or PulSex. You're one and the same.
You know what's funny? What excites me is actually neither of those things. Bridges. Bridges are what I get excited about. So here's the deal with bridges. The only way that you, what's Richard's term? Global domination. The only way you get there is if you invite everyone to come play at your house.
All right.
And the only way to do that is with bridges. But bridges suck. Bridges are terrible.
Right.
Right now they are basically somebody use their backyard carpentry skills to set up a bridge, and they charge a toll, and they just hope it doesn't collapse with you on it.
Yeah.
Is sort of what it feels like.
And they always do, and they get hacked.
Yeah.
You know, there's always somebody at the bridge waiting to take your money. Always.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Or there's a troll under the bridge.
Right.
So
weird.
what was exciting to me was learning and researching how that is essentially an unsolved problem right now. So for me, long term, the exciting unsolved problem that if we could uniquely solve, it may not sound very impressive to people, but it's the kind of thing that if it just keeps working for years, then it will put to rest all doubters, and serious business can come on board. because
Right.
serious business has like real due diligence. They have people and lawyers and things that will need to vet your tech if they're going to use it for whatever they want to use blockchains for. And the more bulletproof pieces you can put together that are competitive strategic advantages, the better you are positioned. And bridges are one of those things that nobody has done right because it's still an active area of research. And so nobody really even knows how to do them right. So like it's an area that we could break new ground. Whereas I like PulseX and PulseChain and all those things. I like those just fine. But that's not what excites me. What excites me are the unsolved problems.
Yeah. That's cool because I mean we see a bridge hack almost every week, you know. It's like doing the news. It's like, yeah, another bridge hack of $100 million gone. Oh, there's $20 million there, and so and are they making their own? I know, are they gonna use the I don't think that they're gonna use Omni Bridge, right? Or are they doing it from scratch, or
so that was a starting point. OmniBridge or AMB is the it's an open source starting point. I think that is the code base that got started from. There's been a couple of changes to it. Honestly, I've been a bit out of touch for 2-3 months or something. Anyway, I've been out of touch
like
for a little while with it.
That's like 10 years in the crypto world.
Yeah, exactly. So as a starting point, that was kind of that's where we came to. So that part of the process, the deliberation early on, it was me and a few other people that were really actively engaged on trying to find what's the best starter bridge. And I think the original thing was like, yeah, we're going to do a bridge with no admin keys. But me and a few other people are like, that doesn't actually exist. So here's what we should do that's kind of the next best thing for the short term. And then medium long term, we should solve that because that is a completely unique value proposition that does not exist today.
So do you think that the admin keys at some point will be burned or just gone, or do you think that it'll always
so the thing with bridges is that it's basically you need relayers, and you need relayers to be trusted. So it doesn't mean much to burn admin keys because I don't necessarily mean you have an administrator who can unlock funds. I mean, you have to get the data from here to there, and you have to be able to trust that that data is correct. Otherwise, somebody can basically double spend on the native chain and on the foreign chain. Nobody has a solution to get around that problem yet. And so that's where there's kind of an active area of research of how do I trust data from your chain?
Right. Is that what's taking so long? Do you think for
No.
PulseChain is the bridge? No, it's good. Okay.
No.
So we got a question here, $5.55. Thank you, Jordan. Are we allowed to ask if there will be a testnet version 3 or what we're thinking about it is right? But it is right now.
You're allowed to ask whatever you want.
Hey, you're allowed to ask anything.
It's a free country.
No, none of that. No answer for you.
Okay. Cancel that person. Cancel them immediately. Teasing.
Do you know any of testnet version 3 or anything?
I suspect there would be, just given that it's not like we're letting testnet v2 bake for the fun of it.
Right.
That makes sense.
Let's see. Deb Kyle, help Hexo bring Richard from the corner. Your share of information should allow him to pass. Okay, we can bring him out for the day.
Just for that. And can I say one more thing too, just for a disclaimer? I'm very spoiled Mexican, and the cats were not planned. I'm telling you right now. That's a total just coincidence.
Yeah. Let's see. We got another one from Piers. If you could choose only one, Pulse or PulseX? Yeah, and I'm guessing that's directed at you, Kyle.
Does that make sense? Because PulseX exists on Pulse.
Well, if you could only have one, so you have.
I think they mean which coin pumps harder is what they're trying to say.
Okay. I thought it was like one couldn't exist without the other.
Oh, that's funny.
You're probably right, Crypto Cop.
Which one would you rather own? You know, that's how
that's
everyone
really
thinks.
funny.
Ooh, yeah.
I haven't had to give this disclaimer in a while. I am terrible at price calls. Terrible at it. I wouldn't trust me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you an answer because if you take my advice, you're wrong, and if you don't take my advice, you're wrong.
I have no idea either. I don't even try to guess that one. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah.
Let's see. You got anything, Crypto Coffee? I've got a couple more, but you go ahead.
I guess I could just make an analogy for the layperson like myself. So it just sounds like, you know, all things considered, PulseChain is not. What I really like that Richard does is he doesn't like to see. He doesn't like to beta test software that's worth millions and millions of dollars. He likes a precedent to be set. And so everything that you do see in PulseChain is just an iteration of good shit that works, that's been working fine for months and months and years, taking the best ideas from previous development and building on the shoulders of giants. So it's like Steve Jobs, iPhone, he didn't invent the concept of a smartphone, right? Internet connected phones have been around for a while. You had the Motorola Razr, maybe you could even say the BlackBerry made the first smartphone. He just made it way better. He made what people wanted. Just like, you know, Tesla didn't invent a car. He just made a really, really good car. So I think PulseChain is the same way. It's picking apart what we want for a specific use case, which is user experience, cheap, fast, and number go up.
Let's see. Jordan L. Are there plans to upgrade to Etherscan for Block Explorer?
Are there plans to upgrade for Etherscan? So we know that the software that runs the Block Explorer now is bad. And we knew that. But it was free. So it was free to clone and kind of hack to pieces to get a Block Explorer. It has been well known that it's bad. Even the company that produces that software knows it's bad. It's what BSC started with, but it just doesn't. But to answer your question, Etherscan is a product. I bet they would charge a lot of money to support your chain.
I heard they charge $1 million or something.
Yeah, so
Dang.
I think if that person has $1 million, it could happen.
It'll be on
Yeah. So I had a question. So there's there's some FUD around Hex at 15 years. Some of the stakes that are staked for 5,555 days. That it's going to fill up past a block for Ethereum, so you won't even be able to unstake some of these stakes because they're so big, and it'll fill up the blocks with all the data that it's got to do. Is that did you guys do some simulations on that?
No,
or
we just guessed. Obviously, yes. Obviously, yes.
He's like, no, bro. I asked my 5-year-old nephew.
Can
I ask you a
so
came
pick a
up.
4-digit number.
He was actually thinking
Gotcha. I
1,500.
Five. No, so originally the max length was 50 years.
Right. I remember that.
Oh, wow.
That was the original spec. 50 years.
Wow.
During the audit process, we learned about an Ethereum improvement proposal, 1883, that changed the load data cost. And so testing was done to determine what the limit would become on the number of days that could be processed. It was tested exhaustively, and while I think the actual upper limit is a bit higher than 5555, that was the practical kind of fun number to use.
Okay.
So let me give a more detailed answer. One of the issues with Ethereum is that they will make changes that are retroactive. So when they change the storage load cost, it becomes the new cost even if you launched your application before that was true.
Right.
So there was some risk that they were going to change it again and increase the cost, and then 555 stakes, 5555 stakes would be too expensive or too much. The counterbalance is that the Ethereum people know that they're playing with fire every time they do one of these things. They never really have a plan for how to deal with existing applications and existing data, but they are aware that they're doing this. So with EIP 1559, they introduced this idea of flexible gas limits within blocks. So there may come a time in 12 years or whatever that you go to end that stake and you do fill up a block, but you fill up a 20 million gas block instead of a 12 million gas block. And in fact, at the time that the contract was launched, if you recall, it was 8 million gas blocks. So that gas limit per block was creeping up over the last few years, even without the specification change that gives you flexibility between blocks. So it's a good question. It was considered and tested for, and even though the ecosystem is a bit unstable, it's self-correcting a little bit, and nobody knows the future, but seems like it should be okay.
Okay.
I've got a question. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Coffee.
Well, this is related to the Hex smart contract, and I'm only bringing it up because some guy much smarter than me brought it up maybe a year ago, and I never really got any closure on the answer, but I know that Hex calculates the daily payouts per T-share over everything. You know what I'm going to ask? Already.
Please continue.
Every single day. It calculates every single day, which basically racks up gas, right? So they're saying, why don't you just take an array, put all the daily payouts in there and do a for loop? And I'm sure it's not that simple. I'm sure there's a reasoning behind choosing to do it. Maybe it's an accuracy thing.
This is a slight variation on the question as I've heard it.
Oh, well, tell me what you've heard.
Sure. So right now, the daily payouts are in an array. The problem is that each slot of that array is stored as chain storage. So you have to load each one, which is why it does it in a for loop, as it happens. And that's why it racks up the gas cost. The version of this question that I've heard is, why don't you use an accumulator and then do a subtraction from the last day to the first day? And so an accumulator would be each day you start at 0. Then day 1, you calculate what the payout per T-share or payout per share is. Let's say it's 1.1. So you add that. Now you have 1.1. The next day you do the same thing, but now it's 2.1. So you add that. Now you have 3.2. So 1.1 plus 2.1 is 3.2. And you just do this through all of time. And your stakes reference the day you started and the day you end. So you have the accumulator state when you start, let's say 1.1, and then now someday in the distant future, it's 1,000. The difference is 998.9, and that's your payout per share accumulated over all those days times the number of days, and you get your payout. Why don't you do that? Because that's very simple. You just subtract two things. That is where accuracy and error comes into play. So the blockchain does not store decimal data, so you can't store 1.1. you have to store 11 divided by 10 or something, which it can't do that either. You can't really store a fraction. You'd have to store multiple numbers. It has to be represented as a fraction because it's fixed point math, meaning that everything is a whole number. The way that coins simulate decimals is by having many, many additional zeros at the back to do precision. So, for example, Ethereum breaks down to units that are 1 divided by 10 with 8, or 1 with 18 zeros after it. So you have 1 Ethereum, you actually have 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 of the base unit. And so you get 18 decimals of precision. You can have 1.111529655521111 Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, because you can only do things in whole numbers, to represent fractions, you have to use whole numbers in a ratio. So 1.1 can be represented as 11 divided by 10, or it can be 110 divided by 100, or etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, to accumulate between days, you have to add those fractions because you can't add them as decimals. You have to add fractions. If anybody doesn't know this or doesn't recall, the way to add fractions is you find the greatest common divisor between the denominators, and then you multiply the numerators and you add those, and then you use the denominator that's the greatest common divisor.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, or enough of the time, there will be no common divisor. So between, say, 99 and 98, there is no number that divides those two things.
Yeah.
Actually, 3 might, but off the top of my head, I don't think it does.
I don't think so.
99 and
4.
101, let's say, if you have it as your denominators. So now you're multiplying each side by the other one. So whatever your numerator was over 99 times 101, whatever your numerator is over 101 is multiplied by 99. You add those things and then multiply 99 times 101.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers grow astronomical very quickly. So you would end up in a very unpredictable situation. So imagine this, we're before launch. We have no idea what adoption is going to be. We have no idea what the claims are going to be like. We have no idea what staking behavior is going to be like. We've simulated lots of it, but we don't know what any of that's going to be like. To do this in the dark is to basically say, I don't know how large of numbers I'm going to end up with as fractions from one day to the next. I don't know how fast that will grow. And there may come a time when that rolls over, it basically becomes too big to store. And if I want this contract to just basically work in perpetuity for 15 years at a time, or 30 years at a time, or whatever, that's a risk I can't take. So storing those numbers precisely is a gamble, a huge gamble that you're going to basically lose data, that you just lose it entirely. So maybe you cap precision. So maybe instead you basically reduce the total size of the fraction if it gets too big, or you cap how precise a fraction you're going to get. Well, now you have kind of an uncertain and variable amount of error from day to day. So the original pitch of this was that you can lock up your money and you can get the return that you're owed, and it's minted by the contract. There's no caveat that maybe you'll be off by 10%. Or, because of precision, maybe you lose 6% or something. Like, you could
Depending
totally...
on the day.
Right.
Yeah,
like
and the more days there are, the higher the precision could be off.
Yeah, exactly. And that error, by reducing each time to keep it within your precision bound, you could hit that error condition every day. And now you have an accumulation of error. So both of those approaches have huge downsides for the promise, the commitment of the product, that it won't do that. And I should probably remind the audience, gas was literally 1,000 times cheaper to use at the time that the contract launched to the following summer, DeFi summer.
Well, thanks for the answer. Now I can finally go to bed easily at night. I'm
There we
such a
go. What are
daze.
your thoughts
Now,
on RH20?
nobody asked me that ever
acquire-
again.
Yeah, it's in, Richard Hart wanting to acquire an exchange. Will this delay the launch? Do you have any?
I've not heard that floated. I know a while ago he was saying publicly he wanted to start an exchange, and it's probably easier to buy somebody with the license than to start your own. I can't imagine that he would delay launch for that. I can imagine it would be very high priority to integrate with PulseChain, an existing exchange, but I that's kind of unanswerable.
Let's see. Has there been any discussion about forking Uni v3 for PulseX when license expires in a few months?
That's an interesting question, but it's an interesting question and an interesting idea because Uni v3 does have some features that Uni v2 does not. Uni v2 is more battle tested, and I think you would want.
Things pump harder with symmetric liquidity.
Yeah.
They do. And
I like V2.
V2 is basically public domain, whereas Uni v3 is not. I know the license expires for copying and stuff, and I think somebody else who would want to clone it should definitely do that. But
that's a legit business idea right there.
That's not something I would do. That's not something I would do. Because I would want to build the targeted features that I want. I wouldn't necessarily want to just adopt Uni v3.
Right.
Because you get the downsides as well.
So Kyle, do you think after all this you'll be focusing on it sounds like you want to go towards ramps and bridges. Is that true?
I mean, that's what I care about. That's what
Yeah.
I think are the better long-term bets.
Yeah. Cool.
I agree. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. One guy earlier in the chat, he gave a $5 super chat, wanted to know about was the critical issue found in mid-May fixed? But I want to know, was it even just one issue it found in mid-May, or was it just more of the head developers saying, hey, we need more time?
So as I mentioned, you pull on threads and you can find some very odd patterns that emerge from that. So it's complicated.
Okay.
There you go, Jordan.
He's like, given we're in the age of outrage marketing, I don't know if it's wise to answer this one.
So
Oh, no,
I
man.
don't know how much time you've got.
No, I
Kyle.
totally get it.
I wanted to
totally
ask
understand.
you before we ended if you've got to go or anything. We've been going for about an hour and 20. But when is your prediction that PulseChain will launch? Everybody wants to know.
So,
We knew
I
it
think I don't know if it's fair for me to answer legitimately. So the last time I was asked, I just said tomorrow. So I'll say that.
That would be so cool.
You guys
Oh,
heard
here.
it here first.
That's my prediction.
Okay. No, I mean, everybody's gonna be like, "Why didn't you ask him the PulseChain when it was gonna launch?" I have, you have to ask.
It's fine. I have no answer. If I knew, why would I tell you?
Right.
Yeah. Good point.
Good
point.
Don't answer.
Your cardboard cutout would jump through the camera and strangle me. Give away his secrets.
Somebody wants to know, do the devs feel neglected from an alleged lack of communication? But I want to say right now, you guys, Richard Hart's only talking to the devs. He's communicating with them more than it's us that feel neglected. So they probably have zero privacy. He's probably watching them 24/7.
He's got a little
person's got
camera
some
on their bedroom.
projection issues.
Yeah.
I just want to know, like, do the devs feel bad that, like, Richard doesn't return their calls? And, like, I know some other people that's happened to, and it feels really bad, man. Like, do the devs feel bad about that?
Yeah.
I feel bad. I think the devs should feel bad too. Just
I'm teasing. As far as I know, he has not been very publicly communicative, but he's always got irons in the fire. You know who he is.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. So there was a question earlier about tornado.cash. I'm sure you've heard about what's going on there. What are your thoughts on all of that? Especially being a developer and somebody going to jail for developing code.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I think that was the wrong way to go. So how to answer this? You teach people through your actions as an authority figure how to deal with you. So let's say you're a parent and you are a particularly abusive one. Your kids will learn how to work around you because you've shown what you do when they make you mad.
Mm.
And I think the Tornado Cash thing and with software in general follows that pattern, that by coming down hard unexpectedly and showing you're kind of volatile, because the tornado people actually made all the best efforts to maintain auditability within the limits of what they could do with a pseudonymous blockchain. The fact that they could export proofs and kind of receipts, so to speak, to give investigators tools, for example. Like they made some good faith efforts. And if you show everybody that you can come in post hoc, despite good faith efforts, and come down hard anyway, what you've shown is that you are not worth working with. It's not worth trying to guess what your future intentions are. It's not worth it. It's better to keep yourself safe. And keeping yourself safe means being more clandestine, being less helpful, not building in tools to like, you know, hey, this is my best faith effort. I'm not trying to like offend anybody. You kind of push people, maybe in the short term, you can stifle that sort of innovation. But in fact, you've just tipped your hand medium to long term into how people should build stuff in the future to evade you.
I think you could look at Ross Albright and Silk Road as another example of that. How many more dark web network websites are there afterwards?
Right.
That are you've never heard of the developers or the founders of those.
Yeah. So it's maybe it's because it was young, or like it was one of the sort of pioneers in the space, that it's like, oh, we gotta come down hard because there's the name recognition. But doing that without nuance sends a message to future developers, and people are not going to stop developing privacy technology. People will now just be much more defensive about developing privacy technology.
Fork it. Just keep forking.
Well, I mean,
tornadoes.
isn't there Hexnado and like, and I think it's hilarious that I think it's hilarious that the day of or the day after that they locked him up, everybody that was a celebrity and had ENS name got
Right.
dropped. Tornado Cat, Ethereum or whatever, and it's like that's
Yeah.
what's gonna happen.
Well, and there's very
These
real
guys, you can't transact
consequences.
them.
Yeah, and like throwing that guy in jail, there are real world consequences. It's not just a meme, but it is it's kind of an obvious demonstration. Like it just doesn't work that way. There's no ACH trail or whatever, right? I mean, like I can just send money to anyone I want.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider leaving the United States, Kyle, as a developer?
That's a good question. I'm not good at planning. Just, big life changes like that.
Yeah.
So, even if I considered it, that's not the same as making a plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a good question right here. Can we get some real info going? Very boring. Well, this guy really wants.
He's like, hey, can we talk
guys.
about the Dallas Cowboys real quick instead?
No, this is trolls. This is the trolls we got going on here.
If you've ever seen Exo's chat, it's a wild, wild west out there.
No, I've never
Okay.
seen that guy. So it was just I just had to bring
They
that
make
out.
fun of my hair.
What happens to smart contracts on? Yeah, okay, we probably nothing. Yeah, we read this. He already did this. We already
Nothing happens to the contracts themselves. It's a client optimization that you may not be able to use common websites to search historical data. Things like Etherscan, because it is their business model, will not adopt that change because it won't work. Why would you pay anyone $1 million to support your chain if they can't look back in the past?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. I don't know. Crypto Coffee, you got any more questions or? I don't want to take up too much. I know you got lots of stuff to do. You got PulseChain. We're taking them away from PulseChain right now, guys.
Yeah. We're the blame for the delay. There ain't no big delays.
I guess I'll just apologize. Sorry for the delay, everybody.
I told my daughter I would show this. I'm sorry. She keeps making stuff.
Oh, that's great.
Ooh, Hex. Ooh, with seashell.
Very nice.
So you're excited. You're excited for PulseChain, PulSex, Bridges, Hex future.
Bridges
you
are where
excited
it's
for
at.
Hex's
Building
future still?
bridges.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, you're just excited for Hex's future, continuing future. You know, the further and ongoing
That's such a hard question because again, like at the time, the point was to put it down for years at a time.
Right.
Right. But we have a community that this is something that makes me sad a little bit, to be honest, that there are people who feel kind of compelled to hustle.
Right.
Like this was supposed to be freeing in a way
Yes.
of people's time and people's attention. And at least for some subset of people, it didn't do that. It may have even pulled them into a world where you're always looking for an angle or like, oh, did you hear this? Yeah, well,
I think a lot of people
you know.
also want to know, how can they help the cause and how can they speed up the progress or whatever, which is in good faith, but often executed not ideally sometimes.
Yeah. I am looking forward to it. I think everyone is learning and growing kind of together because if you're new to the space, you have a lot to learn and unfortunately a lot of disappointment that you're going to run into. But yeah, I would say the arc of the universe is long but bends in the right direction.
Speculative stickiness too.
I like that.
All these extra coins. Just different games to play. Keep you around.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Avoid
what do you think about all the coins? What do you think about all the extra coins, like that are everybody's building and you coming into the I mean you're kind of off the because you're not on Twitter and stuff, right? You're not.
That's right. Yeah, I deleted all that.
You're not really.
I was for a while and answering questions and stuff, but it's just an attention suck. I'm particularly susceptible to getting my attention sucked in. So I just deleted all that stuff. Fundamentally, I think that people, even acting in good faith, are targeting the wrong group of people. Like it's all preaching to the choir kinds of stuff. And that's just the wrong move. I think you may trick yourself into thinking that's what it is. One, you're hitting the same people that already agree with you. Two, you can create the illusion of success because the people who already agree with you already know about your thing and can, do something about it. And three, it's much better to grow a broad base of awareness and support than to go deep on a very small slice that already supports you.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sure a lot of them are in good faith.
Right.
I just think they're kind of aiming in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I've said that about some where they think that they're gonna pump PulseChain by just airdropping hexagons, the coin, and it's like you would want to airdrop all of Ethereum instead of just the hexagons,
For
or you're
maximum
just
onboard potential.
yeah, for maximum. So well, thank you, Kyle, for coming. Thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for coming, dude.
Thanks for having me.
You're a genius.
Yeah,
I
man.
will have to watch this.
I just
thing
come for the
12
compliments.
times.
No one has to pay me anything. Ego stroke.
This is how you really get paid.
Yeah.
I feel
But,
spoiled.
yeah,
I got coffee
everybody-
and Dev Kyle
Yeah,
and the beautiful Hexo all on the same day.
So, you're not, like you just said, you're not on Twitter or anything, so nobody can find you unless, because usually I tell people, where can people find you? But it looks like you
Telegram.
can't be
He's a
found.
shadow. He's
So,
a ghost shadow.
Telegram, there you go.
Rapid
So,
prototype on Telegram.
yeah, there you go. Rapid prototype on Telegram if you guys want to ask him some questions. Thank you guys, everybody, for coming, and thank you for all the subs and donations. So, that's it. We'll see you guys here tomorrow, and thank you for coming, Crypto Coffee, as well. So,
For sure.
thank you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
I'm really busy, so